On this episode of ResiWeek, 3 ways to value yourself, SnapAV acquires HCA, and embracing vinyl. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 270, Value Yourself.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Access Networks.
Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matty Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week we're pleased to be joined by 3 of my good friends. First, we have Katie McGregor-Bennett. She is the president of KMB Communications. How you doing, Katie?
I'm doing fabulous. It's fine Monday morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. It started to rain, but other than that, I'm doing fine.
Here too.
Then we have my new friend, Catherine Wheeler. She is the area sales manager for SnapAV. How you doing, Kat?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And last but certainly not least is Seth Johnson. He is the software development manager for Blackwire Designs. How you doing, Seth?
Doing well. How are you?
I am doing really well. It's a good day. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's kick this off with a story that comes to us from CE Pro. Pete Baker writes a fantastic article on 3 ways to make sure you are receiving proper value for your experience. He mentions a LinkedIn post that he did just the other day that had over 75,000 views about a story of a ship with an engine problem. There seem to be a lot of things with ships and engines and canals and other things like that. Long story short, the engineer shows up, takes a hammer, hits the thing, after a second, charges 20 grand and says, well, the bill is, $2 for the tap with the hammer. The rest is the experience to know where to tap said hammer. Really good article. He covers a couple of key points. Essentially, establish your credibility, set the expectations properly, and don't be bashful. So first of all, go read the article. It's very good. Katie, let me start with you on this one. I've seen this story, this anecdote a couple of times. It's been around for a while. I totally agree with it. The question I have for you, though, is do we as an industry undervalue ourselves too often?
Intentional long pause.
Okay, I was concerned for a second.
That was for everybody else out there to go ahead and render your answer to that question. And I say, yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. And Matt, you and I have been talking about this for at least 9, 10 years about it. It's endemic of our industry that we do undervalue the service that we do, the work that we do, and the expertise that we have. And it's kind of funny because it's the ship story, this has come around a few times. I think the last iteration had something to do with the building trade, and it might have been a deck company.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, it was electrical. But I think it resonates every time it comes out, and I think it's just it's one of those things that we get so into the work that we do and the brilliance of what we do, but we also really do tend to get pinched by the consumer audience, by our trade partner audience, who doesn't really understand the full extent of what we're bringing to the table. And by us, and by we, I'm saying us as an integration community, as a manufacturer community, the community that supports the installation of products. And I think it's when the story comes around, we all get really excited about it, and we share it, and we're like, yeah, no, this is us, this is me, this is my problem, listen to me and hear me roar. But then the roar dies down, and we go back to doing exactly the same thing that we've been doing, or we attempt and we fail. And I think that's the warning shot that comes out about once a year. If you really do need to take into consideration what you're charging and the value that you're bringing to the table, and start increasing your confidence in your pricing and eking it up. It's not easy. I'll be the first one to tell you I'm struggling with it. It's really hard when you want to bring a solid value to a project or to whatever you're involved in. When you start getting price pressures, the easiest thing to do is to acquiesce. It's harder to challenge that, and it's harder to put up the fight, but it's well worth it. And until we as a community all do, the harder it's going to be for the individual boats to rise.
Yeah, very, very good. It's it's one of those things that always cracks me up. Because we've lived in this for so long, it just all seems easy. And we forget that for a lot of people, changing the input on a TV is complicated, and they need notes. Kat, the one thing that kind of hit me with this article that I have a hard time with is how you set expectations, because his second point is set those expectations properly in the beginning. And I've been in the business long enough to where no matter how many times I feel that I've set those expectations properly and the client understands what I'm saying, we very quickly discover they had no idea what that expectation was. How do you go about, is there a foolproof way to go and set those expectations?
I mean, I don't think anything is foolproof. We can try our best. I think the problem lies in the fact that we do this for a living. So when you say it's easy, I mean, easy is a relative word, but technology is more understandable to us. End users don't understand the complexities of it or what the end experience is going to be. So managing that expectation is the biggest challenge. But I think we live in a really interesting time in our industry right now, because we're doing something different these days with remote service calls that we didn't have 5-10 years ago, because we have systems now that allow our integrators to virtually go into customers' homes and troubleshoot systems and reboot things remotely or change things remotely in a way that they didn't have before. And some guys are doing that for free and some guys are charging for it. So there's opportunities that we have now that we never did before to give the end users a better experience at the end of the day. And hopefully people see the value in that and the value that they're providing.
Very good. Seth, I think the all-encompassing aspect of this is that there has to be value in what we do. And we know there's value in what we do, but it's hard to express that. What has to happen to raise the awareness of what we do to where it's at the same level as the other trades, the other industries that are out there that are very similar in skill set and knowledge base, obviously different directions, but nobody questions IT at $200 an hour. No one questions a plumber at $150 an hour. Yet you show up as a integrator and, dare I say, charge $100 an hour. It's like, all you're doing is hanging a TV. What has to happen to raise that awareness?
I don't know. I think this is a little bit easier than it. I don't know. I haven't been in this side of the industry for a while, so I feel like this conversation is easier today than it was 10 years ago. And maybe it's just the grind that we've all kind of fallen into over the past few decades, is establishing this industry, building up trade organizations around it, building up product and services to match match what we do. And I think it's just kind of like over time, like you mentioned a few other trades, right? You mentioned a plumber. They've been around a few thousand years. They have some credibility kind of stacked up against them. Electricians, at least 100 years that I can think of. Roofers, tradesmen who build homes, tile. I mean, these are 1,000-year-old type businesses. And here we are waltzing in the door 30 years ago at the most, maybe 40, if you really start looking back. We're the new kid on the block. And I think it's just a matter of time before we do have that clout. Is that a word I guess I could use here for that built up like the electricians and everyone else do? And I think it's, at least from my experience these days, is that expectation that we're a fourth trade on the job site, the carpenter, the plumber, the electrician. Oh, and you need an AV guy too. Like that expectation is more often than not, especially on the higher end homes, is usually has been there, at least in the last couple of years that I was involved.
Hey, thanks for watching the first segment of this week's episode. To catch the entire show, please click the link below or visit avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.